risks that we take when we open a business. We're serving booze. We're in an industry where there's a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. My friend Doug owns this bike shop here in town called University Bikes. And if you meet him and you say, hey, what do you do? He says, I own the world's greatest bike shop. And in fact, it was voted best bike shop in America, like in the last couple of years by all these magazines. But he's always complaining about his most nightmare customer or his big issue with customer interaction or employee. And I'm like, fucking give those employees or that customer free cocktails or a substance abuse issue and then deal with those problems. How much does that play into your world? New Orleans certainly is a crowd that rolls hard as any restaurant community. How do you deal with that, man? How do you?
What I realized, we had a hardcore drinking culture. We don't have a big drug culture. I'm not naive to say it doesn't exist, but we don't have a lot of that, and we didn't have a lot of drinking culture in terms of people, staying late night at the spots and getting drunk. But they'd all roll out together and drink, and that introduces all kinds of problems. That was a physical assault issue, but you can't imagine how many sexual assault issues have probably arisen as a result of one person having 2 beers, one person having 8 beers, and the person with 2 beers hooking up with the person with 8 beers. Like that's an issue, and we had a real blind spot around that. And we also had a real blind spot around microaggressions. Everybody treated people well in the big context. There was no sexual harassment. We didn't tell, dirty jokes. We didn't do that stuff, but we didn't stamp out microaggressions, situations where you couldn't approach a chef or you couldn't approach a bartender because they'd be stern and quip and they weren't engaging and they wouldn't listen and things like that. And so we went and we sort of scrubbed everything, man. And like we did treat people well, but we weren't thorough enough in terms of, so we backed down on the drinking a bit. We don't promote it or celebrate it as much as we used to. If people want to be responsible and have drinks, that's cool. If people want to hang out, but everybody's got to understand the risks and the responsibility and the expectations. We have a 0 tolerance policy for anything related to sexual harassment, assault, physical harassment, physical assault. And we've been really explicit about that. And we don't allow any microaggressions. And that's a 1 strike rule too. That used to be something we'd talk about, but it would be more of a suggestion. Come on, man, you can't talk to people that way. But it was more of a, we hope you get that to come around. We weren't black and white about it. And now we're black and white about it. And that's what we've had to learn. We just, unfortunately, you just can't afford to, because the lines get really blurry, man. As you know, we're all together 80 hours a week. We're family, we're friends, we're best friends. We hate each other, drinking buddies, relationships come out of it. So it's gnarly, man, but we got to, the other thing we've learned to do is we more proactively promote the vision, the values in the company. We talk before every meeting, we talk about what the vision of the company is. LeBlanc+SMITH creates excellent 21st century Southern hospitality experiences that enable all people to live joyful, balanced, fulfilling lives and to develop great hospitality leaders. And we talk about our 5 values. Number 1, I see you, I love you. Number 2, be inspiring. Number 3, do cool shit and stay humble. Number 4, teach why. And number 5, create joy. And we really, really actively talk about that. And we do it. It was recorded and people knew about it a little bit, but we never threw it in people's faces before. And now we do that. And that helps us with a lot of those issues, kind of proactively staves off some of that.
So you mentioned diversity. Do you have a diversity council in place now?
We don't. It's something I'm kind of championing by myself right now. We don't have a big team at LeBlanc+SMITH. Admittedly, we're a little understaffed. But we have a lot of really good resources here in New Orleans. We have Minnow, which is the Made in New Orleans Foundation. It's run by Lauren Darnell. We're working with a company called Talent Activated that's helping us to recruit specifically Black people here in New Orleans. We feel like, so it's a long way of saying no, we don't have a diversity council formally, but informally, we have a lot of relationships. We're doing a lot of diversity and equity and inclusion training. We're taking seminars and things like that, and we're actively trying to get.
We're just starting that process ourselves to get a DEI council, and the problem we run into is it's 10 white people sitting around talking about diversity.
Yeah.
Whereas Lily White in Boulder is a fucking guest, and it's challenging. So then you reach out and you're specifically asking the few random African American people we might have on the staff, hey, will you be a part of this council? And that feels a little bit contrived. And so it's challenging. So we're reaching outside the group to figure out the best practices and the means to get a real solid perspective. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say, as someone who's pushing this to get this council on board, I don't know what the fuck it's like to be a black person in Boulder,
Yeah.
or a Latino person in Boulder, but we've got enough resources to figure that out. It's important. And I love your mantra and your mission statement and your 5 values that you know, they're clearly embedded and ingrained in your brain. It's awesome to hear. That sounded on the first scrub of listening to what you said, killer and well thought out, probably long process to get to those fewer words that you had, but that's awesome. But that DEI council, I think for all of us is the next step, because
yeah, and look, online
matter is easy, but that's just bullshit. That's what stops. You know?
If there's anything I can do to help with that, online or offline, I mean, I think one place where we're fortunate in New Orleans, we're 60% black here in New Orleans. So we have an abundance of resources. And, you know, there's a couple of things I think why it really matters to us here in New Orleans. You know, New Orleans still struggles. It's a great magical city. It's a city, you know, but also being down here on a day-to-day basis, there's not a lot of racial strife and tension, but there's certainly a lot of racism. And so, you know, we've always had this problem in hospitality where we feel like we can't get enough talented people, but there's a workforce of about 60% of our population that's not really being actively recruited, developed. We're not really orienting our programming at all to sort of reflect what would make them feel more comfortable at home. But if we can turn that tide here in New Orleans, you get a better prospective workforce, but you also, you know, you start developing these hospitality leaders in the black community, and then they go back and they can be leaders at hospitality spots that are essential to the fabric of their communities as well. And then they can start learning some skills around starting other or leading other organizations. And look, that might be a baseball team that they volunteer to coach. It could be a classroom. It doesn't have to be a restaurant or a bar or a hospitality business. It could be anything. But that's how we think if we approach it that way. And there's a lot of people moving in that direction together here in New Orleans. And as you know, you're part of that extended family. So if there's anything that we can do to include you on invites, or if there's any conversations, and a lot of these people that are leading our programming are pretty close friends of mine too. So you could have an open, honest, and raw conversation with them really comfortably pretty quickly.
I'm going to take you up on it. 7 months almost to the day since we all had to close shop, March 16th. How's it going in New Orleans right now?
It's gnarly. It's tough.
Are you at 50% occupancy?
We just got moved up to 75% occupancy. You know our spots. So, you know, for us, we're more constricted by the 6 feet social distancing requirements than we are by the occupancy at this point. And also, you still can't sit at a bar. You can't eat at a bar. And, you know, you've been to our spots too. The bar is kind of both the heart and the soul of all of our spots. Everything emanates from the bar. And so it's probably 30% of our capacity. It's probably 30% of our sales output. And that's not just beverages. That's people having meals at the bar. It's part of who we are. We design our restaurants to be places where single diners could pop in, or a couple from Boulder could pop in unannounced and feel completely at home. And when you don't have the bar, that's typically where that connection really forms most strongly. So that's been tough. And in New Orleans, they've been really rigid about their restrictions and regulations. Now, I'll say, as painful as it's been for us, I do appreciate the way New Orleans has approached it, because it was a really hard lockdown and it's a slow reopen. And as painful as it's been, I think that is more manageable than what people are experiencing in Europe and in parts of New York City, where, you know, a lockdown, you open back up, and then all of a sudden you got to lock back down again. And so I'd rather do it the way that we've been forced to do it here than to reopen too quickly and having to shut back down.
Brain damage. So I think that a lot of people don't understand, unless you live there, that, you know, New Orleans isn't really an enormous town with a huge base population of people, and you're, what, 4.5, 5 million tourists a year. It really drives that town. Hotels are empty, no conventions, no conferences. How are you dealing with, and especially being bar focused? Were you able to take a swing at to go and carry out? How's that gone? What are you working on?
So to go and carry out hasn't been great for us. We design our spaces to be places that you want to physically sit in to enjoy. You want people to enjoy the music, enjoy the design, the photography. Everything we do is very intentionally curated to create an experience. And as much as I love Sylvain's chicken sandwich or Cavan's burger, they're just not as good when you get them at home as they are when you're sitting in that room listening to that music, having that Sazerac. And so it wasn't really designed to be that. So we're doing a little bit of that, but that's not really helping us too much. What has helped us is we've always oriented our places to be neighborhood spots first and foremost. We certainly want visitors to the city to feel welcome, and we want them to experience a little bit of what it's like to live here by coming to our spots.
Right.
So we always do better when visitors are in town. But I think we've had enough of a core local base at all of our places that they've helped us and kind of carried us. And the other thing that's happened is since bars are completely shut down, people are using our restaurants more as bars now. And so they're not drinking at the actual bar, but they're sitting at tables and having cocktails and having wine. And so our ratio of bar sales to food sales for the first time, our beverage sales are outpacing our food sales.
Do you sell
Um,
to go?
we we can now. We couldn't for a while, and that's something that hurt the quarter tremendously. So we have Meauxbar, Longway, and Sylvain because part of the experience in the quarter, it's hard to get there. It's hard to park. It's kind of, and New Orleans has great restaurants in every neighborhood. So if you have to deal with all of the issues of getting to the quarter only to have a singular restaurant experience, I'm going to go to Sylvain, I'm going to have food and drinks, and then I'm going to have to shut it down. It's not worth the hassle. What makes the quarter magical is you go to Sylvain, you grab an old fashioned and a go cup, and you kind of walk down Royal Street and look in the galleries before you go pop into Brennan's bar and you grab a an old fashioned from those guys, or you go, hopping around is part of what makes the quarter magical, and that hurt the quarter tremendously. We reintroduced go cups to go drinks about 3 weeks ago, and it's helped tremendously.
Yeah, they let us do that in Colorado. So um, third party delivery, Grubhub, DoorDash, you can't put booze on those orders, but we're doing self delivery now. And man, you can really round out a check average and a guest experience when they call up for a big to go order and you throw a bottle of wine in on the deal and you show up, and then we're self delivering, taking hospitality all the way to the door where you've got a server who you might recognize or a cook who you've known or a bartender actually shows up at the front door delivering your food. And we're like, hey, we threw this bottle in, or we shook some cocktails and put them in a crowler for you. And, it's just the little gifts and the surprises that you can deliver personally at the front door, as opposed to some DoorDash driver who really isn't connected or passionate about the brand. It's just another delivery. And so that has really helped a lot. But
That's good to hear, and that's going well for you guys.
it's going well. The challenge is we have a couple fried chicken joints, so that's been super pandemic friendly. Go figure. But we have a couple fish houses called Jack's, higher check average, and to your point about certain foods that just aren't good 30 minutes later, that food wasn't built to be put in a bag. We never promoted to go. The chicken concept from day one, we're like, eat it here or eat it at home. It's going to be just as good either way. That doesn't work with a nicer preparation, something that deserves to be put on a hot plate and served, within minutes of it coming out of the pan or off the grill. So that's been challenging for us to figure out larger format. We have 14 restaurants, so there's 14 kitchens. We're kind of pushing in the next 30 days to have 28 concepts working out of 14 kitchens, and 14 of those will be kind of ghost delivery only type concepts. So
Smart.
just trying to drive that top line and figure out how to keep the revenue coming, half of it out the back door. But we kept 5 of our joints open throughout the entire. We never closed and just did a banging to go business. But many of them they didn't apply because it's just not food that people think about ordering for home consumption and home enjoyment. It's tough.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that though, and I'd love to pick your brain on that delivery model. But because I think that would be a cool thing for us. That's a nice wrinkle to add.
Figuring out, is it lasagna? Is it, big plays of enchiladas, big trays of enchiladas? Is it some kind of a taco kind of a kit? All these home kits. We did a lot of pop-ups too, where we do bouillabaisse kits and chio kits and paella kits and risotto packages, and then pair them with a bunch of different wines or cocktails and give people 2 weeks to think about it, all on a pre-order system. So the deadline's on Wednesday. prepaid, pre-ordered, so you know exactly who's coming, when they're coming. Pick up on a Saturday morning from 10 till noon, and you know we're out in front of the restaurant. We got all these bags. We're able to meet the guest again, hand them this great food and this booze, and tell them to have a great night. Call us if you got any questions. We'll walk you through the preparation. So it's an interesting time. I did a conversation this morning with a woman here in town, Kendra Anderson, who owns this really sweet bar. And man, she's challenged right now. She's having a real tough time figuring out what the next pivot is, because that we have a curfew here of 11 o'clock. So for her, she starts to get busy at 9. It starts to happen at 10. By 11, she's rolling. Well, the curfew's 11. So it isn't just the 50% occupancy, it's the 65% reduction in operable hours for a good bar. You know, nobody's rolling into a bar at 7 o'clock at night. So,
yeah, we have barrel proof, and I'm worried about bars. I mean, I think bars obviously will last, but I think this pandemic is going to create some behavioral shifts that will fundamentally affect the way bars work for the next couple of years at least. And so, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel as restaurateurs, but we were, the bar seemed so easy and simple compared to all the restaurants. And we were kind of thinking, man, then we just do more bars. And then as soon as COVID hit, it's like the value's all in the restaurants again.
Yeah, COVID won't be here forever.
No.
So what, on that line, what do you think? What happens in the next 12 to 18 months, especially in your sort of bar focused side of things? I know you're getting more into restaurants now, but specifically about bars, how do you see it happening?
I heard an interesting, I heard a scientist this morning talk about pandemics typically take 18 months, no matter where they are, no matter what form or what format. So they're saying, June 2021, that's 18 months. And by that time, just throughout history, every pandemic has been 18 months, no matter what you do related to vaccines, no matter what you can kind of take some behavioral changes to lessen the incidence of death, but the pandemic's going to be where the pandemic's going to be. So I think that puts us at June 2021. What we've tried to do at our restaurants, we tried to redesign the business models entirely that allow us to pay people more money while being as profitable as we were in 2019 on 50% of sales. And it's a hard problem to figure out, but if you can create those finite parameters, I mean, it's almost like an algebra formula, where
the success you'll have coming out of this, if you can still maintain that mentality.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot around it. And look, it's working a little bit. We have to get our sales up a bit. And what we're learning is we need a few more people to be able to, we're probably 2 or 3 people shy per restaurant to really consistently and feasibly meet the demand to allow us to hit that sales number that math proves out. But the math on paper right now is still proven out pretty well. So, I'll keep you guys posted on how it works. One of the challenges we're seeing is that it's a pretty inflexible model as it relates to a lot of the flexibility people tend to enjoy in hospitality. It's a lot of pressure, and people are learning a lot more, and they're growing tremendously from sort of their own personal development. And they're making a lot more money even than they did when things were great before the pandemic. But the trade-off is it's a tremendous amount of stress, pressure, and inflexibility. So the model is working, but we have to tweak some things. We need to bring on some parts on people. And the other thing is we can't be so rigid, because there are always going to be people who would rather make a little bit less per hour for the freedom and flexibility to be able to travel or to write and things like that. And so we've learned we can't be quite as absolute as we want it to be.
Kind of a base. Did you always have tip pooling? Did you reopen with tip pooling? Have you ever done any kind of tip pooling scenario?
We've always had tip pooling, but the managers, obviously the salaried positions, were never in the tip pool. Sure. They just were incentivized based on sales and profitability performance.
We did have tip pooling, and we reopened with it, and it allowed us to offer all the cooks about a $6 to $7, and so we got dishwashers making $23 an hour now, which is awesome.
That's killer.
It came from a sharing of the tips from the front of the house. So we lost some of our snipers who were making upwards of $50 an hour. because we leveled it out a little bit. And so it's been great. And in the process, we've been able to lower our labor costs because people are hustling and they all know the harder they work and the more they work together, the earlier they get out, the more of the tips they share. So we don't have a lot of lingering. People are coming in later, they're leaving earlier. There's a lot more teamwork and sense of family. And that part has been really, really great.
That's killer to hear, man. That's awesome. I'm glad it's working out. We've always pooled, and we've kind of felt that way. We never had the back of the house in the pool, and now that we do, it's awesome. And look, one of the fun things that's happened is when it gets real busy, sometimes you'll see one of our chefs, one of our cooks, working the host stand, checking people in, or
food and hustling ice to the bar and all of it. I mean, it has really created a pit crew mentality that they're getting the job done. Which is
yeah, it's been awesome. It's been special. Well, I'm glad to hear it's working out for you guys too. And I think that's the future. You know, we always thought, to kind of to your point, I always felt like the number that we wanted to get to in terms of all of our culinary guys was 18, 19 bucks an hour, because that exceeds what you can make driving an Uber. And I couldn't really figure out how to get there. The economic model didn't necessarily work. But what I also realized is in restaurants, the way things have always been done, we ask people to do a lot of dumb, wasteful shit.
yeah.
And so if you really took an objective look at what we're asking people to do and you eliminated things that were less essential so people could drill down on things that were more essential, you'd be shocked at how much more you can produce with the same number of people. And so what's ended up happening for us is, I don't know exactly what it is per hour, but annually people are making significantly more than they were when things were our best year ever. And things are still really, really tight down here in New Orleans, because to your point, the tourism market is non-existent, and you have a ton of great restaurants that are all trying to hold on. So there's a very limited local market that's been hit very hard, because our biggest employer is the hospitality sector. So we kind of get hurt twice.
Yeah. What do you see happening to the New Orleans restaurant community as a whole, 12 months from now? Like let's fast forward to April of 2021.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it doesn't happen, but I think you'll probably see 25 or 30% of the restaurants that existed in New Orleans pre-COVID close in the next 4 to 6 months. You know, and candidly, you know, I'm thinking about closing one of ours too. It's just, you can't afford to, just things are so tight right now. You can't afford to bleed money. You can't afford to waste human resources or capital. We have one that's just really struggling no matter what we do, and they're doing their best work ever, and it's just not working. So, you know, instead of having them beat their heads against the wall, wind that one down, bring all of that talent to other restaurants that we have that really could use their leadership, and just let people kind of be. And I just think that's going to happen, unfortunately. I also think you're going to see food become even more democratic in New Orleans in a certain way. So some of the cool things that are happening is people are, you know, talented chefs who maybe lost their positions or got huge pay cuts. They're cooking out of their own kitchens and setting up tables in their backyards with temporary catering permits and things like that. And they're doing dinners for 20 people, but it's really well curated and really well done. And without all the overhead, they're just paying for the food and the wine. Chefs are doing pretty well. I'll tell you what I'd like to see happen, what I think would be cool. One of the things we're flirting with Longway a bit, we have our culinary team that does our own food on Wednesdays through Sundays. And at Barrel Proof and Longway's Monday and Tuesday, Barrel Proof 7 nights a week, we do pop-ups. And what I think would be really cool is if we could start promoting chefs or culinary programming the way that we've always promoted bands. And you know, a chef gets a gig, and you're gigging at Longway on Tuesday night, you're gigging at Sylvain on Friday night, you're playing at Lost Love Lounge on Wednesday night, but people kind of create almost the same dynamic that exists for live music we do with culinary programming. And so I think that might be a way to save some of these restaurants that would otherwise close. If people didn't have to worry about the economics of food quite as much, could just live off of the beverage revenue and the beverage expenses, and then have their kitchens be venues for some of this displaced culinary talent, I think you'll see a pretty innovative approach to how people consume food here in New Orleans. And it could be cool. It could be a good model to be copied.
Yeah, it's a new twist on food hall for sure. It's a different mentality. Venue.
Yeah, I mean, it changes the economics. It relieves a lot of pressure from the restaurateurs, but for the sous chef who was making $45,000 a year, he can pop up twice a week, do 5 to 750 a night on 2 nights, basically just pay for his food, and it's just kind of him rolling. He makes a lot more money than he was making as a sous chef on, it's intense days, but fewer days a week. It's an interesting twist.
Did you get PPP funding?
We did, yeah, we
How did
did.
you, how did you handle that?
We handled it like a loan. We didn't use it the way that it was defined to be used. New Orleans was shut down. It literally would have been like dumping money over the side of the boat. So we figured that the spirit of that program was to kind of save jobs in the long term, and that's how we approached it. So um, we brought back about 40% of the workforce that we had pre-COVID. We shut down on uh, March 15th voluntarily before the city shut down, and we were able to bring about 40% of the people back. But we didn't. They were on unemployment. We kept in constant communication with them. We spent 2 or 3 months really thinking about what this new business model looked like, and we brought everybody back on at the end of June and kind of started. So we got the PPP loans funded in early May, so we didn't hit the threshold of starting to spend. We have honored that threshold of spending 60% on labor. We're not spending on anything other than labor, rent, and insurance. So we're following those rules. But we didn't hire back the 75% quota required to get forgiveness, and we didn't start spending the money as soon as it was funded, which is also required. So we're doing our application for forgiveness now, and hopefully we can make some case based on being in a special industry, as we literally weren't allowed to operate. We didn't have any delivery mechanisms in place, so there was literally no way we could do it. And maybe we'll see. But I'm not planning on it being forgiven economically from a financial planning standpoint, which sucks.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
We got the funding. We acted like it didn't exist. We just, we dug in hard. We kept 5 restaurants open. Those 5 carried the company on their shoulders. We furloughed about 650 people. We had 85 chefs and managers that we kept on salary, and we pivoted them over to the 5 restaurants that were open. So we had a chef at Jack's working the fry station at one of the chicken joints, and the GMs running food out to the cars, and everybody just jumped in. And like you, we just really sort of reevaluated everything. We had some slimming of upper management. We looked hard at all the expenses, the window cleaning, the house cleaning, just all the things that as we get bigger, we get lazier. We need to have someone do the steam cleaning of the sidewalk, and we have someone taking care of the plants. And we were just like, all that goes away. So we divided and split up all those roles, and we got real lean, and now we're still in that lean mode. So we've been able to kind of stay stable all summer. Weather in Colorado is nice, so we don't have the challenges you guys do in August, where it's like, yeah, it's nice, but it's Vietnam hot outside right now, and
Yeah.
to sit outside when it's 90 and 85% humidity. So like right now, October 15th, we'll seat the patio tonight at most of our restaurants, and it's a cooler day today. But we've had, our big challenge with outdoor seating all summer has been the forest fires that we've have really made it almost impossible to sit outside because you can't breathe. There's ash falling down like snow, and we had a big blow up of another fire that's about maybe 40, 50 miles as the crow flies from here. And when the wind's going the wrong way, we feel it. It's snowing ash and smoke. So we've been all right. The state of Colorado, the governor, business owner, entrepreneur, smart dude, the guy that was before him for 2 terms of office, John Hickenlooper, owned the first brewery in Colorado, restaurant owner. So we've had, 12 years now of business owner, entrepreneurial mindset running the state. And so we're quick to react. Governor Polis shut down the mountains August 19th or March 19th, March 20th, before spring break. They shut all the ski areas got closed, and that was huge for us because that's a big amount of traffic. You know, you guys felt the crux of Mardi Gras and what that did for New Orleans. That's, you know, that's the closest thing to Mardi Gras as we have, which is spring break in the mountains.
Yeah.
I actually got COVID, and I didn't know where I got it until I was talking to a doctor in our backyard in May, and she asked my wife, "Hey, where do you think you got it?" And you know, our answer was like, "Shit, the 1,000 hands we shake a day, I have no idea." And she said, "Hey, were you at this little bar on March 7th?" And I was like, "What?" And we were there listening to a friend's band, and happened to be a dude who had been in Italy, went to New York, went to Vail for 2 days, came down to the same bar, crowded little bar, snowy night, everybody shoulder to shoulder. And there were like 15 people that blew hot, you know, 6-7 days later from that experience of all being crowded into that bar. So it's been an interesting path of how the state has handled it, but I have nothing but high praise for our leadership at the state level. The Colorado Restaurant Association has done a ton with all of us in mind. Sonia Riggs shown up huge, and a couple of local restaurant guys are leading are very involved with the IRC and that funding that might come for all of us. So we got some people banging some drums out here for all the right reasons.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And look, man, I hope, you know, I hope we can hold on. I hope everybody can hold on. A lot of, you know, restaurants are a hard business or a hard industry. But my hope is once things get a little bit safer and the regulations ease up, people, you know, you don't really appreciate what you have until it's almost gone. So my hope is, and we experienced this after Katrina in New Orleans, you know, people flooded all of the cultural experiences and institutions affiliated with New Orleans right after Katrina. And that really helped us rebuild. They went to the bars and the restaurants more than they probably could afford to because they wanted to make sure that it made it. They did everything related to live music and, you know, all the culture around Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest. And so it was a really special time. And I'm hoping we experience that same thing in restaurants in general, you know. And the other thing is, to your point about kind of getting fat and lazy, the restaurant industry's had a pretty good run for a while, and we probably all got a little fat and lazy. And the fact that we can hold on at 50% of revenues is a huge marker of that, while also paying people more money.
Yeah.
Just means that we weren't doing shit the right way. And so, you know, my hope is once we get to the other side, all this money we lost and all this hardship that we endured, you make it back really quickly because you're much more efficient, you're much more effective. And I got to tell you, man, I'd love to know how you feel about this, but I think as restaurateurs, we've got to expect higher profit margins. I think we've got to expect paying people more is the right thing to do, paying people more equitably, while also making higher profit margins. And I think one of the things that really strained our business is this collective ownership of, you know, 5% is doing pretty well, 7% solid, 10% you're not getting out of the park. That puts so much strain on our industry. And I think that we need to maybe collectively own that if it's not 15% or even 20%, it's not worth doing, and it's no kind of life. And I think that the low margins are what creates most of the, you know this as well as anybody. Too long to succeed in hospitality, it came at a tremendous personal expense to your health, happiness, and relationships.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that is the financial pressure and anxiety. And I know it's master the obvious, but when you're making a 4% margin as an owner, working 80, 90 hours a week, sweating everything, and things take a turn. And so now you're at -3 or 4% and you can't cover it because you couldn't save enough cash to make it through a lean time. It's just, that's where the personal ruin is. And so I think if we all figured out that we could own higher profit margins collectively, some of which we have to pay for with increased efficiency and effectiveness, some of which guests have to pay for by paying a little bit more for what they're getting on a daily basis. And just saying, if we can't get X, it's not worth doing. And I think that's going to be a hard paradigm shift to own, man. But hopefully after this situation, we all understand we need to own that. We need to expect more from and for ourselves.
Yeah, there's definitely a misunderstanding from our guests, from our landlords, of what's really going on with restaurant math and metrics. Everybody's like, "Oh, you got a line out the door, man. You're printing it. You must just be banking big cash." And it's like, man, these margins are tight, and it's a very human and labor intensive business. And there's nothing that we're paying for this year that's cheaper than we paid for last year. We don't find those savings. You know,
Right.
we can't produce our stuff offshore. We can't go to China and find a factory that's going to do it for cheaper.
Right.
We're domestic, and if we're doing it right, we're staying local, and we're trying to support and support the craft, and really lean towards sustainability. And you know, building a sustainably perfect house is a really, really expensive endeavor. Um, it's not an easy thing to do, and I don't think there's a good understanding of that. I don't think people really get it.
There's not, and there's not. And look, and part of that is on us as restaurateurs because we've been willing to deal with all that bullshit, you know, because a lot of it, frankly, you know, it's true. We're driven by ego. You know, it's like you could be a general manager making 60, 70 someplace else. You can be an owner making 40, you know, and you do the owner gig because it's a stroke of the ego. And some of that stuff we got to start letting go of.
So I think you and I are both going to get jobs for somebody else next week, is what I'm hearing.
Oh man, I thought it was an interview. Man. Nobody told me this was a podcast.
Okay,
I
so
thought I was coming to work for you.
last question. How are you dealing? You know, this is a lot of stress at a lot of different levels. You're a married guy, you got kids, you got responsibilities, you got employees, you got huge debt. Your business has been cut in half. You're talking about closing restaurants. How you holding up through all this?
Dude, I'm pretty good, man. And I'll tell you, I started studying and reading a lot about Stoic philosophy about a year and a half ago. This guy, Ryan Holiday, writes books, just really interesting stuff. And I've always kind of believed, but I never really could articulate the fact that you can't really control what happens to you in life. You can only control how you respond, you know? And, you know, I have, to your point, man, I have a wife, I have kids. I got to show up for those guys. You know, I got a bunch of people who are in as bad, if not worse shape than I'm in. They're relying on me for their livelihoods, and I got to show up for them. And so I feel pretty good, man. I understand that what happened is not my fault. There's some things in it that I need to own. You know, to your point, if we hadn't been so fat and happy for the last 2 or 3 years, we probably could have generated a lot more savings, a lot better efficiency that would have allowed us to navigate that. But I'm just treating it all as a learning experience and using this as an opportunity to kind of reset and get better and understand what's mine to own and what's not mine to own, and just trying to take one day at a time. And looking at the little things, man. I mean, it's also a good opportunity to sort of be grateful for some of the small things that we have and we get to do. I'll tell you, man, I was fucking burnt out before COVID, badly. And I was burnt out. I just wasn't doing things the right way. We didn't have enough infrastructure at LeBlanc+SMITH. We were kind of doing too much too soon. We weren't really focused on quality. We weren't dialed in on anything that we were doing. And I was just not enjoying it, not having fun with it. And when we closed down on March 15th, I felt like a huge failure. I felt like I failed 150 people who trusted me with their lives because I couldn't afford to keep paying them. And then 2 weeks later, all these people to whom I'd looked for inspiration, lessons, Danny Meyer, you know, you look at all these big guys, they did the same thing. They were in the same boat that we were in. And so then I started to acknowledge that it was a little bit broader, economically speaking, but also in our industry, the whole industry model was kind of broken. And I spent like two weeks licking my wounds, and then decided that I wasn't going to let it beat me down, and I was going to figure out how to make this opportunity one that allows us to redefine how we show up in the hospitality industry so that people can flourish and do what they love to do to the tremendous benefit of their personal health, happiness, and relationships. So I think about that shit every day, dude. I'll tell you. And I've never had more fun. I've never been more inspired. It's stressful and it's a lot going on, and you know we're bleeding badly, and it's gonna be a long time before we dig out of this hole. But back to that idea I just told you about, you don't know what you have till you almost lost it. You know, I was burnt out and second guessing life before this thing, and then it was taken away, and it has slapped me in the face about who I am, what I love, and what kind of mark I want to make on the world. So,
Yeah, your point about it was big for me, and I kept saying I was on like a roller coaster ride and just enjoy the ride because you can't. There's nothing we can do. That part about it not being my fault was huge. You know, I talked about the risks earlier that we take when we open restaurants, and I was talking to my wife Dana last night about, you know, the nature of all the connectivity, the phone and the internet, and how you're just you're waiting, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, but when I owned my first restaurant, internet didn't exist, cell phones didn't exist. You know, the big crazy hip fucking thing was this little thing you had on your belt that beeped an analog phone number that you needed to call. And if it showed up twice, it meant it was really important. So, you know, you just took things as they came, and it was just an easier pace. It was still hectic, but there wasn't this frenetic amount of information coming at us at all times. And the fact that it wasn't a fuck up of my own that shut our 14 restaurants made it all so much more palatable. You know, it made it all, we're all in this together. Here we go, and start helping people out and start bailing and bail her boat and bail his boat, and they'll bail our boat. And it certainly made it a lot more palatable, because on a given day, there's an employee injury or the overservice of a guest, or there's just 1,001 things that keep me up at night. And weirdly, this craziness, it not being my fault, although a couple people have tried to blame the pandemic on me, but it so was not my fucking fault. Yeah, it was a little easier to tackle for sure.
Yeah, and that's hard for us in the restaurant business, man, because we're used to beating the shit out of ourselves. You know what I mean? Looking at all the imperfections, we never really look at what's going right. And so that was particularly tough. I can relate to that, man. I went through that hard. I mean, I'm a pretty optimistic guy, man. My glass has always been half full, but for 2 weeks right after, I was literally and physically hurting.
It was shocking. How could you not be? It's like, what? What do you mean all our restaurants are closed? I mean, what do you mean everybody's out of work? What do you mean the world is shutting down? Like, it was just shocking.
I'll tell you how far up my ass my head was, Dave. I remember reading about them shutting all the restaurants down in Italy about 3 weeks prior, 4 weeks prior. And I was like, God, man, that must really suck. I can't imagine. Thank God that would never happen here in the United States. I can't imagine what we would do if that happened in the United States.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, the other thing that I did too that was kind of messing me up that I've learned not to do, and it's kind of to your point about going more analog in life, is I've never been a huge social media dude. I like to see what my friends are doing. And like, I'm not one of those people who's kind of on it all the time, trying to figure out how much better everybody's life is than mine. But I started reading the news a good bit and just trying to keep up with information and knowledge. And, you know, I started plugging in a little bit more to social media, just kind of seeing what people's, dude, that shit is toxic, man. The news and the social media stuff. So, you know, part of what kind of pulled me out of this stuff is I stopped paying attention to all of it and just kind of living in my own reality, which I know is a little naive, but God damn, man.
There's enough going on in all of our own realities that we don't need to be voying in someone else's. There's that documentary, Social Dilemma. Have you seen that?
No, I'm dying to see it though, man. Did you see it?
Yeah.
I heard it's going to scare the shit out of me.
It's a gut check. Yeah. It's everything we're just talking about right now. How you just get completely sidetracked with the need for the news, the need for the worst news to come at you. You know, the need to know that you're going to look at your internet, your email account real quick, just to make sure that everything's okay. It's like a babysitter of your life. You know, we have 3 kids. They're older, so they're out of the house. So, you know, it's a text message or something in an email that I'm going to get that's going to alert me to the challenges these days, more than just a house phone ringing, because we don't have a house phone anymore, you know? So it's changed a lot.
And look, man, it's awesome. I'll tell you what else I've really enjoyed. You know, I'm enjoying finally meeting you, but something else that's happened is like, we're all so busy, man. We're all in our own way so much. Like, I've established some really great relationships with people here in hospitality who are fucking killer, who are doing cool shit, who I've always respected, but I've never had the occasion to just pick up the phone or send a text and be like, what's up? Like, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? So, you know, I've gotten a lot stronger with Nina Compton, who's cool as shit. And if you haven't met her yet, you need to. Natalie Jordy, who owns this killer hotel, Peter and Paul down here in New Orleans.
I grew up in time we were in town.
Awesome. Did you love it?
Oh, it was fucking killer. Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Oh, it was. We love that. You know, the Marigny and that whole district down there. That's our zone. What'd you say? Yeah, and Bacchanal and that whole scene down there, man. That's as good as it gets for us. So we love that little hotel.
Yeah, so that's awesome, man. So I hope when the ledger settles in a couple of years, we'll be able to dig out financially, but we'll realize we probably gained a lot more from COVID than it cost us.
Yeah, there's some silver linings in there for sure, man. We're all learning a lot, and I think the things that when we're looking at doing 30 or 35% less in a period, and then we're doing as well or actually making a little more than we did last year, we're learning a ton. Like, we're doing great.
No doubt.
It still hurts.
Good.
Winter's going to be rough. Well, Dana and I are going to be down next week.
Yeah, I'm going to meet you guys. I'm going to crash for a little bit if that's all right.
That'd be awesome. We're going to Sylvain on Wednesday.
And I want to host you guys for this, but we just opened this place called the Chloe. It's kind of this hotel and restaurant, but I want you to come check it out.
Love it. Yeah.
I'd love to have you guys for lunch, drinks, whatever works in your schedule. I know you got a pretty thick itinerary every time you come here. So
I don't know. Yeah. We've made some good friends down there now. Ryan Pruitt and Donald's. We've gotten to be friends with him and Cam and Marcus and Caitlin, and Spicer has been real kind to us and to me, and introduced me to a bunch of people down there. And so it's we have fun coming down there for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Great crew. Marcus, those guys, that's my favorite restaurant in New Orleans right now.
It's so original, man. And then that food is so tribal, everything's coming off that grill in the back and then coming inside and going to that grill inside. And it's just, Marcus he's a talented dude. And Caitlin's passion for the front of the house and the cocktails and all the great wines and sparklings they're pouring on a nightly basis. They're having fun. That's the most underrated aspect, man, is their drinks. I mean, the food's spectacular, but their drinks are equally killer. Yeah. Without a doubt. All right, brother. Well, thanks for the convo. Joshy, I think we're going to wrap it. Always good talking to you, man.